Once again, we're glad to have you back. And we also have a special guest that you brought along with you, Sam Kaplan. Sam, good to have you here, too, as well. Thank you for coming in.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Rabbi, last time we talked, I believe we were talking about Hanukkah.
You said it right.
Right, and I'll try to get this one right as well. But today we're going to talk about a celebration that is coming up, and that is Purim, that you'll be celebrating. And Rabbi, tell us about the celebration and what is the traditional celebration for that today.
Okay, so Purim, in very brief, is the story of one of the unfortunate many times where the Jews faced annihilation, the threat of annihilation, and there was an evil man, Haman, who became the prime minister of King Ahasuerus, and he's pronounced in Hebrew, who's the king of Persia, and he ruled over most of the civilized lands in those days. And together with the king, they conspired to kill the Jews through a mix of diplomacy, prayer, and fighting. The Jews were able to fend off their enemies, and this day has become a celebration. There's obviously much more deeper significance, but we Jews celebrate it in celebration of what happened, but also in commemoration of the knowledge of what we must do to continue to survive.
And the whole story, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole story kind of centers around three characters: Haman, who would be the villain. You've got Mordecai, and you have Esther, which is one of the female heroes in the what we would call the Old Testament, in the scriptures as well.
Yep. That's correct. There's also the king, who he was sort of in Jewish literature. He's described as a foolish king because he didn't know how to make up his mind, and he was easily swayed by Haman. And eventually, when he marries Esther, because his first queen gets killed by himself, it eventually the story changes and fate, so to speak, changes. And what's interesting is it's considered one of the greatest books because God's name is not mentioned once in the book. Sounds great from a rabbi, but the reason for that is because the story happens. It's not some great exodus from Egypt. It's a very natural story, and one can read the story, watch the story, and say, okay, it makes sense. He happened to get a Jewish queen. She was really gorgeous, so he fell for her, and the story can kind of make sense. And it's a typical Jewish idea that even though it makes sense, it's a sensible story, we still believe, it was obviously God's hand throughout it all, and God can make miracles in the mundane as well, and that's part of what it's a realization for, that even though we can work through diplomacy and even wars sometimes, we recognize that every triumph is actually God's hand.
Fantastic. Now, how is Purim celebrated today?
As we spoke about last time, Jews like to celebrate all triumph with some food. So we eat. We also read the story of Esther, and we read it in the Megillah, which is basically the scroll. We read it from an original scroll written by a scribe in handwriting with a special parchment and ink, and we read that. It's a bit lengthy. We read in the Old Hebrew, but it's read. It takes about 25 to 35 minutes. We give gifts to each other. We give money to the poor, and we have a feast. There's four main things that we do on Purim.
And how does that all tie into the story? The giving of the gifts, I think, are mainly food, right?
The gifts are food gifts, because there's a custom in Jewish tradition. Once again, a real celebration is had when you give to somebody else. So actually, Mordecai and Esther, after the story of Purim, they enacted this holiday, and in that in decree, so to speak, they said it would be a day of giving gifts and a day of giving to the poor, and all of that is just to bring about pure joy. And we all know that when you're really joyous, you automatically want to give. In Judaism, it works the other way. We tell you, if you give, you're going to be truly happy. So it's the same idea.
That is fantastic. What are some of the highlights for you from a rabbi ministering to a community? This particular celebration, what are some of the highlights for you?
Well, I forgot to tell you, there's another custom which has come through the ages, and that is that we get dressed. We get dressed up in costumes. It's the Jewish Halloween, if you will. And in Israel, it really has taken that on because they don't celebrate Halloween. And it's a good opportunity for a rabbi to let loose, even though he's... and there is another mitzvah, which is that one is supposed to, and don't try this at home, but you're meant to actually get drunk, and to a point, and there's many explanations on how to fulfill that without actually getting inebriated, but some people like to err on the side of caution and get a little tipsy.
So, can you let the cat out of the bag? Let us know how you're going to get dressed up, any particular way?
This is we cannot tell you.
All right. And you brought along Sam Kaplan with us. Give us a little background on Sam, if you would, Rabbi.
Awesome. So I wanted to find a specific kind of student to bring along with me to share the cream of the crop, and Sam is greatly involved in Jewish life on campus. He's a member of the Hillel board, but he also most recently founded ChaiPak, which is a new student group on campus, which is there to, and he's going to talk about it, I hope, which is there to advocate for Israel, just in the public opinion. And Purim really connects to that because, like I said at the beginning, unfortunately, Purim is sort of a precursor of what was going to happen to the Jews many times afterwards. And Purim teaches us that like what we have today. And that time they didn't have Israel. They didn't have a state, but they had many great leaders and diplomats, so to speak. And Mordechai was one of them. He actually worked in the palace of the king. And we have to use all methods available. But at the end of the day, the Jewish answer has to be that we will not disappear at all costs, and in the end the Jews do end up fighting in that story, not trying to advocate violence or anything, but we have to be ready to advocate for ourselves on all levels. And he is really he's someone that I believe has the right idea and is a very pro-Israel, and that's important for our Jewish community, especially seeing what's going on around the world. Just few days ago, a security guard, Jewish volunteer security guard in Copenhagen, in a regular synagogue, gets killed for nothing but just existing and being Jewish, and obviously Paris, France, and other places. So it's a scary time for Jews, and we have to be, while there may not be a Haman that has decided to kill all Jews, even though there has been a number of them, Ahmadinejad and others, but there is an unspoken decree in many places where Jews are being marginalized, and in Britain they have admitted that. There was an inquiry by the government where they said that anti-Semitism has doubled in the past 10 years, and it's a scary reality, and we have to face it and be aware of it and fight it head on. So he'll talk about that.
Sam, well, let's start about how did you first get involved, and then talk about how you branched out into this new effort here on campus at Hamilton.
Right, so I come from a traditional conservative Jewish family, and Israel has always been really an essential aspect of my Jewish identity because I have grandparents who went through the Holocaust. They were living in what was at the time going back and forth between Poland, Ukraine, and Russia. And I have relatives who were persecuted and died in the Holocaust. And so I understand the necessity for a Jewish state in order to protect the Jewish people. And so when I came to campus, I realized that there was not much discussion of Israel, even now when there's a war in the Middle East and just fighting between Palestine and Israel, and also just things you hear about, like in France, attacks on Jewish kosher markets and things like that. And it came to my attention that look, we shouldn't wait at Hamilton for the fight to be brought to us. We should not fight, but advocate for Israel and allow people to understand why it's so important to the Jewish people to have Israel. And so that's why I founded ChaiPak, the Hamilton Israel Public Affairs Committee, with a few of my friends at Hamilton.
Now, are you originally from this area, or are you from outside of Hamilton?
Yeah, so I'm from Westchester, New York, just outside of New York City.
Okay.
Big Jewish population where I'm from. So, yeah.
And then you come to Hamilton College, which I imagine a little bit different.
Yeah, a little bit of culture shock. Yeah, I mean, it's been great, though. It's given me a new perspective on my Jewish identity.
Well, before we get too far down the line, what are you studying at Hamilton anyway?
So I'm actually studying, I'm trying to be a double major in government and music.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Government definitely needed.
Yeah.
Now, one other act. You decided to start this new group on campus. What's kind of some of the feedback that you've gotten so far?
So we just got established as a group. We're planning our first few events. We've tried to make our first few events. We've tried to make them not too aggressive. We're having them be very. We're trying to establish this as not as much of a religious cause, but as a cultural cause. Because though it is essential to the Jewish people, the state of Israel, it has many Bedouins, Druze people. It has Muslim people there, and so we've started off with relatively tame things. We're coming up with a cultural food thing, cultural food truck where we'll have Druze food, Jewish food. So that's been all right. We're hoping to bring to campus a speaker talking about the war on Israel on campuses soon. So we'll see what kind of feedback we get from that. So far it's been relatively positive. We haven't really. We're not trying to antagonize anybody.
Will you be doing anything centered around the celebration of Purim?
Yeah, we hope to. We're like I said, we just got ourselves fully established as a club, but yeah, we hope to. It's really a holiday that is extremely relevant now as much as ever. It's really a story of the persecution of Jewish people, and something that's really important about it is that a lot of people think the story kind of ends when Mordecai exposes the plot, and then Haman's plot to destroy the Jews, and then just ends. But it doesn't exactly work that way. It's the decree can't be taken back, and the Jewish people are allowed to defend themselves, but they still have to fight for their own defense. And I think that is essential now, because it brings up the idea of advocating for Jewish people before the fight is brought to us. There's a movement on campuses around the country called the BDS movement, Boycott, Divestments, and Sanctions. And on many campuses, especially in the West Coast, it has been really horrifying for some Jewish students, because what it really aims to do is divest in Israel and take money out of Israel. And it's really a statement more than anything. But what an issue and a trend has been is that Jewish students haven't advocated for the defense of Israel before that fight has been brought to them. So that's why I think on Hamilton, where there's not much discussion right now, it's important that we bring that discussion first. So
now, what year are you at Hamilton right now?
I'm a freshman.
Freshman, okay. Yeah. So you're going to be there for a few more years anyway.
Yeah.
I would imagine you kind of like to see the after you graduate with honors and go on, like to see it continue. What are kind of the long range plans that you hope to see with the club on campus?
Well, what we want for the club is really just for it to be advocating for American, especially on the campus of Hamilton, but just American relations with Israel. We want this to extend beyond the conflict that's much of the talk between Palestine and Israel, because historically there's been persecution against Jewish people coming from different directions for millennia, and so we want this club to not be just in defense of Israel in the face of conflict, but just to nurture support for Israel, especially in times like now where there's some conflict between the Israeli government and American relations, making it tough. But yeah, we want it to extend beyond this conflict. I just want to see the club foster the support for Israel that I think it deserves.
Fantastic. Well, I see why you brought Sam along with you, Rabbi. He could steal the show from you if you're not careful.
That's done.
Speaking of that, and that has been kind of a topic that hasn't been maybe discussed too much in in the we would call the mainstream media, but I know a lot of those who would consider themselves on the right, they've mentioned it a lot about the current administration's icy relationship with the Israeli government. And coming down to your level, Rabbi, kind of give us your input or your thoughts on the whole matter. Where apparently Congress is going to have Benjamin Netanyahu come and speak to them, and the president doesn't seem to really invest the time or have the consideration to put into a relationship with what should be our strongest ally in the Middle East.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but now that you did, I'm going to talk about it.
The cat's out of the bag now, Rabbi. You go at it.
Because I wasn't sure, how much of an issue that is in this area, but I'm glad that it is. And listen, I don't think it should be a conservative or liberal issue. I think in the past, some of the greatest allies in terms of White House administrations have been Democrats. Sometimes they've been Republicans. Some of the worst have been Republicans. It should be across board. It seems to be that it's becoming a partisan issue more and more of a time, which is sort of horrifying in my opinion. But there is no question, I think, and this is my personal opinion. I do not speak on behalf of any organization now, and that is that the administration has been very harmful in its relationship to the Jewish state, and in turn, as a result of that, to the Jewish community. Now, you have to remember that many in the Jewish community, I would say the overwhelming majority of Jews, are Democrats. It's just how it's been. And not the overwhelming majority of Jews are outspoken allies or supporters of Israel. They might be pro-Israel, but many times they'll put their being a Democrat before being pro-Jewish, and that's its own problem. But that kind of feeds into the administration's ability to feel strong about its position. I understand, that there's a lot of political game over here, and I'm not, I am not a politics major, a government major, and I think it's a great double major that he's getting. Doing both, he can filibuster a session in Congress by playing music. I don't know. That would be great. Be a good mix. But I don't know what. I think if you read it over the past few years of Obama's administration's acting towards Israel, I think you would see that it seems that he feels that he can really be charming to other people, to enemies of Israel, and he doesn't. I don't think he wants the destruction of Israel, as some fanatics like to say. I don't think that he's anti-Semitic personally, but I think that he overestimates how much he can achieve with the enemies of Israel, and it just ends up, the picture looks bad when he'll embrace Iran to talk to them, but then won't meet with Netanyahu. And it doesn't matter what the explanations for it are. And yes, we need Iran to be our friend, and I don't want to get involved in the Israeli election, but it doesn't look good no matter what anyone says. And that's, I believe, what is happening. And should Netanyahu come, should he not come? Is it too close to the elections? The fact is, Israel feels there is a threat of annihilation to it, and I think fair enough. And we are terrified. We all have cousins there. We all have relatives, and if we don't, it's our our fellow Jews. And so it's scary. So I'm very disappointed as a newly American citizen, and if I could vote retroactively, I would change it.
That's one thing we don't allow in the country, however. And it's amazing because it's not even he's taken some heat even in the mainstream press over even going back to the situation in over the cartoon in France, not having a high-ranking diplomat or somebody on behalf of the administration to be part of the demonstration, where a whole bunch of other political leaders from across Europe were there marching in the streets, and we had no representation.
Right. I think that was, if anything, just a political mistake. That's what they claim. I don't know if there was more to it. It just seemed like they didn't realize it was such a big deal. They thought it was just some minor rally going on. I could understand if free countries would have, I don't know about boycotted it, because that wouldn't have been very good either, but if there would have been a little bit more noise about the fact that a terrorist sympathizer and sort of terrorist like Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the PA, was present, which is almost a sad satirical joke, because he comes to stand against terror while celebrating it in Israel, and celebrating and giving money to terrorists in Israel. So that was very offensive too.
Well, and you look at if you look at a world map, if you haven't lately, and you take a look at the Middle East, Israel is surrounded by I guess you could call enemies, for lack of maybe of a better term. But if you look at a political spectrum, Israel is the only democratic country that has elected representation in the Middle East. So anything, we should be doing everything we possibly can to support our allies.
And it's more than just a democracy. It's more liberal than America is. So if anyone has any liberal values, any rights, women's rights, gay rights, any rights really, freedom of press, all of that exists in Israel and exists nowhere else. And to every liberal that wants to become a detractor of Israel, they just have to ask themselves, if I wanted to go to any other country in the Middle East and voice opposition to that country, how long would I survive? But when I come to Israel, maybe that's why they feel they can do it to Israel, because they feel that there'll be no ISIS coming after them. I don't know, but there are some countries that are becoming allies just by mere necessity. Egypt, I don't know if it's an active ally, but it's definitely becoming in Israel's interest, and there are others in the neighborhood. So I wouldn't say that they're all enemies poised on Israel's destruction, but then none of them are lovers of Zion. Let's just say that.
Well, do yourself a favor and just take a look at the map of the Middle East and get an idea of what Israel is up against. Rabbi, we've been talking about a whole bunch of things now. Give us an idea of what you're doing in the Hamilton. For people that weren't here or maybe missed our first visit with you, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is talk about what you're doing and the work you're doing in the Hamilton campus, the Hamilton area. Okay.
So, like I said last time, we are not actually affiliated formally with Hamilton College, but we do work with a lot of students. Mm-hmm. And since our last visit, we've hosted many students for just nights for dinner, and we like to converse with them, same way we enjoy talking to all kinds of students. He hasn't come over yet. Whatever, we'll talk about that off air.
Well, there's a mark against Sam. One mark. But
and we have coming up. We've had some different major breakthroughs, I could say. But there's a healthy Jewish community on campus under the Hillel banner, and now there's the Pro-Israel group, and we're filling in where we can, acting as a family off campus for Jews, for Jewish students who want a place to unwind, eat dinner, or study. We have some religious services, and coming up on Purim, we have a celebration for students on the eve of Purim, which is on the 4th of March, Wednesday, and that's for students specifically, and a select amount of professors who are going to come and be judges for the costume contest.
Oh, fantastic!
Sam, get working, and then the next night we have a more public event for locals and others, and that will be on the Thursday night, the 5th of March. So we do have a whole array of stuff going on Purim itself.
If people wanted more information or wanted to stay in touch with you and what you're doing, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
ChabadClinton.com. So that's CHABAD Clinton.com.
I'm glad you spelled that. I never would have got that, Rabbi. Sam, we'll go back to Sam Kaplan for just a moment. Sam, what's it like, and give us kind of your input of having faith on campus. What do you find from the Hamilton campus, some of the feedback maybe you've gotten from other students?
Right. So it's been a journey for me so far already. I mean, it's like I said, it's kind of culture shock for me. I came from a town that was 30% Jewish, which is a huge Jewish population, mm-hmm. to Hamilton, which is it's 10% Jewish, but religiously it's much smaller than that, people who religiously observe. And a big moment of shock for me was on Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. There are 5 services, 3 at night and 2 during the day. And on the second day service, I showed up and it was just me and the rabbi, which was, for me, that was big culture shock for me. You need 10 people to make what's called a minyan. So in order to say all the prayers, you need 10 people. So what really occurred to me was that this is it's what's going on here is cyclical. There aren't many Jewish students here, and as a result, there aren't many Jewish facilities, and as a result, there aren't more Jewish students coming. So it's really a chicken or an egg or the egg situation, and I kind of realized that I along with other students who are in the same boat as me had to kind of step up and make a change for that. So we've been advocating for a kosher kitchen on campus so that Jewish students can keep kosher, abide by dietary laws, and that's going to be coming to campus in 2 years. We when the construction's able to be done. So we've gotten that done. Hoping to see a temple or like an ark or at least a Jewish prayer room alongside the chapel and the Muslim prayer room. But other students on campus I think feel similarly to me, but I think even more importantly than being religiously Jewish on campus, just as a culturally Jewish person on campus, which there are a lot more of, I think that when I came to Hamilton, I thought that the amount of conversation about Judaism and the amount of students who were avowed and outwardly proud of their Jewish culture was less than I'm used to, and so I think that's been changing, and I'm happy with that. Yeah.
What would you say maybe is the most well-known aspect of being Jewish, or maybe it's something that something that's misunderstood by someone who maybe is outside of the Jewish faith?
Well, I think something really important to understand is that people outside of the Jewish community, and even some people in the Jewish community, don't understand exactly what it means to be Jewish. There's the best explanation that I've ever received from it was I saw this rabbi present on it, and he said that he was speaking to someone on a train, and they asked him, he said he was Jewish, and they said, well, what exactly is Judaism? And he said, well, it's a religion. And they said, so what do you believe in? What exactly do you believe in? And he said, well, different people believe in different things. There are secular Jews, there are Reform Jews, conservative Jews. And he said, okay, so if you don't need to believe in anything in particular to be Jewish, then it's not really religion. What is it? He said, well, I guess it's a nationality. And he said, so what's your country, Israel, and what's your language, Hebrew? And he said, yeah, well, but I don't really speak Hebrew. And he said, well, if it's not nationality, what is it? And he said, maybe it's a culture. There are Ashkenazi Jews and there are Sephardic Jews that tend to come from specific places. And he said, so where are you from? And he said, well, I'm American. And he said, so what is it then? What makes you Jewish? And he said, and so the thing that historically and biblically the Jewish people have been referred to throughout time is Bnei Israel, the children of Jacob, the children of Israel. And so he said, I guess it's what it really is it's a family, and you can take what aspects of it you will. Not all Jewish students on campus are believe in certain things, are religious. Not all Jewish students are from a certain place, but they're bonded by first of all a combination of those things, and second of all by this association as a family. So I think that it's important to understand that Jewish people, there's a huge spectrum of what that means to people. So yeah.
That is a great conversation. Just keep asking questions, and eventually you'll get down to it,
Yeah.
the roots of it. All right, our special guests this morning, Rabbi Didy Wax and Sam Kaplan. Rabbi, before we let you go, is there anything else you want to share with us before we turn you back out into this beautiful weather here in Central New York?
No, I thought Sam said it beautifully, and that is really the Jewish story, and what keeps us together as that family is by, just like in a family, there's sort of like, family things that we do, and there are certain family traditions. I would say not the cultural aspect, because he's right, everyone has their, but there are certain core things that Jews do. For instance, having a certain diet and stuff like that. and that does keep us together. And I'd say one other thing is we've all been faced with the same annihilation threats, so that kind of keeps us together, unfortunately. But that was perfectly and beautifully said, and I think that's true.
Well, Sam, it was a pleasure meeting you. We wish you all the best at Hamilton. Only a freshman, and well, you said you brought us the cream of the crop, and it certainly looks like you did. Sam, we appreciate you coming. And before we let you go, anything else you'd like to say before we let you get out of here?
I'd just like to reiterate one last thing, which is that whether you're in support of what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing with coming to Congress or not, or in general with Israeli politics, I think an important distinction to make in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and just with the establishment of Israel is that you don't have to support everything that a nation does, but you really should support its right to exist and acknowledge that. So that's just the last thing.
All right. Well, Sam and Rabbi, we appreciate you being here, and we'll see you again sometime soon. And again, Rabbi, if someone wanted to get a hold of you and get more information, what do they need to do?
ChabadClinton.com. CHABAD. ChabadClinton.com.
Now, do you have a Facebook page yet, Rabbi? Or?
Yeah, we have everything. But if you go there, you'll find everything.
We'll send you to the
easiest.
one particular place. Yes. All right, fantastic. Well, guys, I appreciate the talk, and I know we'll have you back again, and we're looking forward to it. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much. Coming up, we've got CBS News with the headlines, and then we got Doug Steffen with the Good Day program here on 1450 WKAL.